In recent years, Jim Carrey has become very popular for reasons other than his movies. His seemingly erratic speeches, his on-cam appearance, and ideas that leave interviewers unsure of what to do have been topics of discussion, labeling him as irretrievably crazy. But is this true? Who is Jim really? And how can we understand what he says? Researching the topic, I came across simple offensive remarks to even conspiracy theories about his behavior. But, from my point of view, I believe that the truth about Jim is a bit simpler than it seems. I believe that to understand all of Jim Carrey's supposed craziness in recent years, we have to understand where it comes from and what it is. Therefore, to answer this first question, we have to go back a bit and explain how Carrey achieved this great fame in Hollywood that would lead him to have certain revelations that scared everyone. As a child growing up in Canada and influenced by his father, Percy Carrey, he began to perform his first imitations, realizing he had a special talent. At the age of 15, due to his family's poverty, he started working and performing in clubs, where he would develop his routine of imitations. In 1983, he would be regularly performing at the famous The Comedy Store and appearing on television on The Johnny Carson Show, replicating his routine of imitations, with Clint Eastwood and James Dean being my favorites. From here, Carrey would have a fascination with television, taking acting classes, and taking on small roles in films until his first starring role in the 1985 comedy Once Bitten. Interestingly, I recently discovered that movie thanks to a video by the post-punk band Haunt Me, and I was surprised by how young he looked alongside Lauren Houghton. In the 1990s, his career took off thanks to the series In Living Color, and the fantastic year of 1994. It was hard for me to believe that in that year, Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber were released, with the latter being the first movie I would see of his. And from then on, I would love his movies, no matter how stupid they were. In the following years, it would follow with Liar Liar, The Truman Show, where he explores a more serious side, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas. By this point, Carrey was known worldwide, and although he had only received a couple of Golden Globes, he was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. In the early years of the new millennium, he continued with great box office hit movies, but gradually over the years, Carrey would start not to participate in as many productions compared to the 90s, where he managed to film 3 movies in 1 year. So, after some time and with a few years without even acting in important films, 2017 arrived, the year when Carrey would go viral, but not precisely for a new mega successful movie. Carrey began to make rather strange appearances, such as the famous one on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. He also gave interviews where his responses would depart from the conventional to become philosophical with existential touches.
But Jim, you got really dressed up for the occasion. You look good.
No, I didn't.
Was that an
get dressed
accident?
up. I didn't get dressed up.
Who did?
There is no me.
There's no you.
No.
We're not here. This is a dream?
There's just things happening. And there are clusters of tetrahedrons moving around together.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's happening in our world right now? Because there is a lot of news that actually is relevant that's not that
Here's
uplifting.
the thing. It's not our world.
None
That's
of this
the
is
key.
real?
Nope.
So you're just passing
We don't
through.
matter. We don't matter.
Oh, wow.
There's the good news.
What this project, what this documentary means for your life and for your career?
It means we're all going nowhere. It's a big pageant of nothing rising out of nothing and happening for no one. And once you understand that, all the pressure's off and you can just enjoy yourself. And it's the my that's the problem, you know, so you can do all this without the my involved. You know, you can do it in a way that it's not, life isn't happening to you, it's happening for, you know, for the good of everyone. It's just it's a play, it's a giant, you know, field of consciousness dancing for itself, and you're here to make me happy, or to kind of, it's making itself happy, you know? It's like one soul. That's how I feel. I feel like...
In addition to his unconventional interventions, at the same time, he would reveal his great passion for painting in the documentary I Needed Color. Here we see Jim more tranquil, without all the pressure from the media, simply enjoying his art, but still keeping connected with external events, especially with his political paintings, where he portrayed his discontent with Trump and the United States elections. Could this new passion be the reason for his strange behavior and distancing from the big screens? In 2018, to Hollywood Reporter, he mentioned, "I didn't like what was happening, the corporations taking over and all that. And maybe it's because I felt pulled toward a different type of creative outlet, and I really like the controlled painting, of not having a committee in the way telling me what idea must be to appeal to a four-quadrant whatever." By 2022, almost exclusively filming the Sonic movies, he was surprised by announcing his supposed retirement.
Yeah.
A lovely thing. Well, I'm retiring, but...
No.
Yeah, probably.
Are you being serious, or are you screwing with me?
I'm being fairly serious, yeah. I have enough. I've done enough. I am enough.
An internet theory that gained popularity regarding the reason for his recent statements and his departure from the industry would be the death of his girlfriend. In 2015, Carrey experienced a devastating loss when his girlfriend, Catriona White, passed away. He was implicated in a wrongful death lawsuit, although the case was later dismissed. Nevertheless, her death deeply affected him. This apparently aligns with the time when his interviews began to take a different turn. However, upon further investigation of those interviews and several from the past, I realized that Jim's philosophical or spiritual ideas were already present before his girlfriend's death. In fact, many years before he even met her. For example, in 2014, Jim gave a speech for Maharishi International University that would have a similar content to what was mentioned in the interviews in 2017.
We're not the avatars we create. We're not the pictures on the film stock. We are the light that shines through. All else is just smoke and mirrors, distracting, but not truly compelling. I've often said that I wished people could realize all their dreams and wealth and fame, and so that they could see that it's not where you're going to find your sense of completion. Like many of you, I was concerned about going out into the world and doing something bigger than myself, until someone smarter than myself made me realize that there is nothing bigger than myself. My soul is not contained within the limits of my body. My body is contained within the limitlessness of my soul.
But even more relevant would be his identity conflict in 1998, during the filming of the movie Man on the Moon, a biopic of Andy Kaufman, a character who, during the few years he was in the media spotlight, managed to show an unprecedented irreverence on air. Jim's problems with this role would be revealed years later in the Netflix documentary Jim and Andy. As during those years, in Jim's own words, the executives at Man on the Moon studio, Universal, had tried to bury the footage at the time in order to preserve my image so that people wouldn't think I am an asshole. In the documentary, he's shown so deeply immersed in the character that he confesses that during filming or not, he was Andy. During those months, he ceased to be himself to the point that Andy's own family members spoke to him as if he were their son or father. This only reminds me of how he often mentioned that for him, we are all just playing characters that don't really exist, not even Jim himself. So it's clear that by this time, his beliefs were already present. The fact that he disposed of his own personality confirms his ideas about how he himself doesn't really exist and is just playing another role. All of this leads me to think that Jim already had certain concepts about life and being for quite some time. In fact, in the interview with Hollywood Reporter, he says that perhaps all of this had been brewing since childhood. He'd lost himself writing poetry and what he deemed philosophy at that age, just trying to figure out what we are and why we're here. The classic stuff, he says. I believe we can agree that Jim didn't become crazy overnight. Over the years, he formed certain thoughts that in today's public eye seem new and strange. Okay, but just because he had those ideas a long time ago doesn't necessarily mean they're not crazy, right? What the hell is he trying to say that sounds very profound, but at the same time confusing? After watching many of his interviews and speeches, I think Jim's thoughts can be summarized as: there is no self. What exists is a whole of which each one is a part. The external reality and ourselves are a single inseparable entity. So we shouldn't worry about certain sufferings that we sometimes feel we endure, since the one who suffers from these sufferings is the ego, which, well, does not exist. If you're familiar with any of this, it will surely sound a lot like some Buddhist or Hindu ideas, such as the Advaita Vedanta tradition, which in very brief terms advocates for the idea of non-dualism. Reality is not constituted by parts. That is, ever-changing things have no existence of their own. Does this mean then that Jim is a Hindu or Buddhist?
I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, I'm whatever you want me to be. It all comes down to the same thing.
It's more of a syncretism, a blend of ideas from these religions without necessarily being one. The key to all of this can be found in two people, Jeff Foster and Eckhart Tolle. In several interviews, Jim has mentioned them as very close friends, and many of you may know them as they are quite popular in spiritual books and conferences. It's them who I think helped shape Jim's thinking, which ended up being an interpretation of what was vulgarly known as New Age spirituality. That is a set of beliefs rooted in non-Western religions that don't quite qualify as a religion themselves. I'm not going to judge the truthfulness of his beliefs, but it seems clear to me that they are not uncommon when you take a little time to research other religions or the same spiritual movements promoted by Jeff Foster and Eckhart Tolle. So I believe the only unusual thing about all of this is that he decided to make it more public. And since we are not accustomed to ideas outside of the West, they may seem crazy to us. Personally, I think Jim is ultimately just a simple man whose story, marked by poverty in his childhood, his rise to fame, and tragic circumstances like the death of his girlfriend, made him reflect on the purpose of existence. Something very human, if you ask me.